Welcome to episode 65 of the Loane Hockey Podcast, where today we're going to be talking about a very special player who's been very well renowned as a goal scorer in the NHL and was the 2016 first overall pick. That's Auston Matthews. And when you talk about Auston Matthews' game, you don't necessarily see a lot of transformation in his shot. Like he's had a shooting ability, distinct shooting ability since he was a junior and since he was playing pro hockey when he was playing in his draft year. And so with Matthews, you're getting a dynamic shooter. And the thing that's really evolved within his game, within his shooting game, specifically over the years in the NHL, is his ability to use the pull and drag release, ability to weight transfer, and ability to shoot from a standstill. So he's developed power without having to use much effort into his shot. So he's worked on becoming more efficient with his shot usage and his power output, and that's really allowed him to transform not only his shot, but how he's shooting and how he's shooting from specific areas because he can shoot from afar from a standstill and still rip the puck top shelf, right? And versus when he started off in the league, there'd take a little bit more energy and weight transfer on his shot to get that actual power output right away, directly from his shots and his stick and how he's able to utilize his stick in order to transform the weight as well. Because that's another big thing too that's very underrated when it comes to shooters is stick flex. Nowadays you have carbon made sticks where they flex a little bit more and codependent on the player. Some players like a little more whip, other players don't because they like the feel and they like it all depends on the player again. But they like the feel, they like the preference for certain things. So some players have a little bit more whippy sticks. That way, when they're able to shoot, they're able to get a little bit more power through the follow through on their shots versus some players who like to have heavier sticks and they like to do the opposite in a sense. So less whip. And there's benefits to both, but again, it depends on the player, it depends on what they like the most. And with Matthews specifically, there's a little bit of whip in his stick, so he's able to still generate that power, that velocity through the follow through on his shots and through his stick. And at the same time, in terms of how he's able to release the puck, he can still curl and drag. So that curl and drag release is what really allows him to generate even more power than he actually does. So you see this a lot with shooters nowadays. Connor Bedard is a really good example. The pull and drag release, the toe drag release, where he's able to create a little bit of whip in his stick, whip and downforce in his stick to be able to generate power, be able to generate efficiency within his shot. And then it's similar to Matthews because Matthews has that hybrid like ability again where he can shoot from a standstill. He can shoot from different points on his stick. So he can shoot from the heel, but he can also shoot from the toe really effectively. He can shoot from toe to heel or heel to toe, either way. But usually for him, it's toe to heel because that way allows him to get more positioning advantages with how he's positioning his stick and how he's positioning his body to set up the release. And another big thing when I watch this game and I watch how he shoots, you can see him shoot sometimes and his feet aren't even pointed to the net. That's another thing that really impresses me when talking about his shot ability because he can shoot his because sometimes it's much easier for players to have their front toe, their front foot pointed to the net. So that way they can generate more balance and power on their shot and be able to release with a little bit more accuracy. With Matthews, I know it's actually the opposite, which is actually really fascinating when talking about him. He can have his feet angled directly away from the net, almost counter the opposite direction of the net, and he can still find a way. And I don't necessarily know how. I'd have to study him a little bit more in that sense to really get a feel for how he does it. But he can turn his feet away from the net and still generate the maximum amount of power and accuracy. Part of it, I believe, has to do with some of that core area ability and the arms. And again, I don't know necessarily, and I don't fully know how, but I'd want to study that more in depth when talking about him because it's a really fascinating thing. And so with Matthews, his shot ability has transformed so much. He's become almost a 70 goal scorer. It's insane to even say that's applicable in today's NHL, but it's true because he's so dynamic in how he shoots. He can shoot from anywhere, he can shoot from a standstill, and he can surprise you with his shot because most players and most defenders aren't going to be expecting a Matthews shot from a standstill. They're going to be expecting a pass or a deference to alignment or something because you're not really expecting a player to shoot when he's not set up. But that's the thing with Matthews that gives him leverage. He can open those shot lanes, take advantage of them because he's shooting from standstill, and defenders aren't going to clog those lanes right away. So, in talking about him specifically and how he's able to transfer that ability, that gives him leverage in terms of positioning standpoint in the offensive zone and also a shot advantage. So he's able to create lanes for himself. We know how dynamic his shot is. He can shoot anywhere. He can pick really small windows and pockets, and he's really good shooting off his backhand as well. Really good at maneuvering it tight. He can still release up high on his backhand, and he's more dynamic on his forehand, like any player is with his shot naturally. But that backhand ability, that backhand shot also allows him to score from any angle and score from uncomfortable angles and take advantage of certain situations where other players would be a little bit more hesitant to do that. And another thing you've seen with him that's evolved over the years is competitiveness and tenacity in these own situations. And he's spoken publicly about how he wants to become a well-rounded player and a more defensive-minded center, not necessarily negating the offensive impact, but providing more impact on the defensive side of the puck as well, and becoming a two-way guy who can shut down any situation. So you saw situations where he's playing on the PK, he's playing late man or late game situations, and he's playing situations that are a little bit more unorthodox to his style, especially defensively. So having him in those situations allowed him to get more reps and also in practice at the same time, not only practice but games as well, being able to get those sustained reps inside the defensive zone, being able to adjust positioning, being able to maintain consistent habits in defensive play so that way he can become more efficient and well-rounded in his defensive habits. And that's really impressive because you look at a player of that caliber who's now the captain of the league, an elite goal scorer, almost a 70 goal scorer, still wanting to commit to the defensive side of the game. Some players would not want to do that, but other players are willing to do that. He's one of those that is willing to do that. Obviously, in his early stages of his career, his wins above replacement value wasn't necessarily negated that much because his sustained and very high offensive impact really negated his defensive ability. Sort of similar to Connor McDavid, where you're not relying on defensive ability when it comes to his game. You're relying on the offense, and the offense outweighs the defense. As long as you're able to score, that outweighs the defense, as long as you're winning too. So that's the biggest thing. And then with Matthews now, his wins above replacement values continue to increase even more because his defensive numbers, even strength and PK numbers, have continued to improve slightly. And not necessarily super high yet, but they've improved. And that's a really good thing when looking at Matthews' game in the best stage of his career, where he's becoming more defensive minded. He's becoming more positionally aware defensively. He's becoming more of a shoulder checking player who can understand how to be consistent within those little details and defensive zone habits and being able to use his stick more efficiently. So a lot of it is linking together to his offensive play because the defensive foundation usually translates a little bit better, not all the time, but a little bit better to offensive transitions and then offensive zone play. So being able to link together three zones essentially. And with Matthews, that's what's really intriguing about that is he's linked together more of his ability from defense to offense, 200 feet of the ice. So having that well-roundedness has really allowed him to transform his offensive game, positional habits and instincts inside the offensive zone even more, and being more astute positionally to be aware of where he needs to be, where he needs to position himself, where he needs to attack into space in the ozone, and where he needs to be an option in certain situations. And you still see some a little inconsistency, but it's not nearly as bad, especially now. He's become more mature in his game. He's obviously the leader and captain, like I mentioned, with the Leafs now. And I believe that captaincy and his commitment to his defensive role are two big things that are going to continue to evolve his game in the future because that leadership role really speaks volumes to him as a member of the Maple Leafs now. And it's actually a really smart decision when you think about it because you know, and you knew at some point Matthews would be the captain, but with Tavares there, it probably would have taken until his 30s to become captain. But Matthews is, I believe, around 26, 27. So you look at that, what is it, 26, 27? It's been 8 years since he was drafted. So yeah, around that age, because he would have been 18. So yeah, around 26, 27 ish. And that's a perfect time for him to become captain now because now he can evolve his game even more, continue to get better, continue to make strides in certain areas that he can improve upon, and figure out areas that he can become a better version of himself in. So that's a testament to his ability, and he's going to become even more impactful, I would imagine, as a defensive and offensive player heading into the future with the Maple Leafs.